All right, we're ready to get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Adam, and I am Plotly's community manager. For this webinar, I'm also accompanied by my colleagues from the Plotly marketing team. Today, we'll be showing you a collection of incredible Dash apps built by Dash and LangChain community members. These apps were part of a larger list of apps submitted to the Dash LangChain Challenge that we ran last month. In a few minutes, you're going to get the opportunity to hear from 3 community members that built their apps using Plotly, LangChain, and of course, Dash. You will also get to hear from the impressive elements of LangChain from Erick Friis, a founding engineer at LangChain. After the presentations, we'll share a few exciting features that we're developing within Plotly, as well as highlight how to join our open source communities, so make sure to stick around all the way to the end. Without further ado, let me introduce our 4 guest speakers. First, we have Manuel Aguilar, a software engineer in the United States. Then we will have Troy Scribner, an investment manager at TS Bays in the United States. Erick Friis, a founding engineer at LangChain in San Francisco, California. And Vic Zommers, a statistical researcher who used to work at the Central Bank of England. Before getting started, those watching us today, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please submit them in the chat box. We're going to do our best to respond to them at the end of the webinar, but if we don't have the time to get to all of your questions, we will respond to them via email afterwards. So keep sending us your questions. Let me kick off the session by providing a brief intro into Plotly. For those of you who are not familiar, Plotly was founded in 2013. Since then, our graphing libraries have been downloaded over 15 million times. Plotly is the creator of 3 globally known products: the open source graphing libraries, Plotly.js and Plotly.py, the open source data app framework called Dash, which allows you to build Python data apps that natively incorporate Plotly graphs, and Dash Enterprise, which offers you deployment automation, security, design, professional services, as well as support. The app challenge that brought us here today would not have been possible without the usage of the powerful LangChain library. So we've invited Erick to share some insight with us. Hey, Erick, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Adam. Glad to be here.
Erick, since its release just over a year ago, LangChain has been making it easier and easier to implement AI applications powered by language models. Can you please give us a quick overview of LangChain?
Yeah. Let's go over the LangChain ecosystem from the bottom up using the diagram on the right. At the bottom, we have our LangChain core library, which defines core abstractions used by everything above. In particular, it features the LangChain expression language, also known as runnables, which allow completely modular chaining of components, allowing you to completely customize the internals of any of the chains that you're using. Additionally, it supports streaming, batching, and parallelization, to name a few, which really helps with kind of having really high performance from your application. Next up, we have all of our integrations and community and partner packages. LangChain allows you to connect with almost 700 integrations, models, vector stores, and agent tools, which obviously help you build your application better. And then next up, we have our sample cognitive architectures in the LangChain library in the form of chains, as well as LangChain templates, which allow you to customize some of those runnables. And at the top, we have LangServe and LangSmith, which offer deployment and observability features that help you inspect kind of everything else that's going on in your application. Special shout out to LangSmith, which decomposes everything listed into readable traces. And if you want access to that or hosted LangServe while they're in private beta, feel free to DM me on Twitter.
Thanks, Erick. Now, when comparing Dash and LangChain, one could say that Dash is more of a front-end library, while LangChain focuses mostly on back-end. That said, do you see any similarities and overlaps between the 2 libraries?
For sure. There's a ton in common as well. Dash and LangChain are both open source projects at their core, and they have great communities around them. In particular, we both support Python developers in a way that's model provider agnostic. So anyone kind of looking to have that flexibility would kind of get a lot of benefit from using both. Part of the intersection I'm most excited about, though, is the complementary nature of the two projects, enabling some combination data visualization and language processing features that you'll see today from some of the projects. I love the open source energy behind both projects and communities, and I hope all the audience members will too after seeing some of the applications that have been built with both.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate you sharing this overview of LangChain and the similarities. So the apps that were built by the 3 community members, let me actually go to that side so you can see, are pretty advanced apps. For those viewers that are new to LangChain and Dash, I'd like to offer an example of how the 2 libraries can come together. At a high level description, first, you build your chain by connecting basic LangChain components. So in this case, for example, we have our 3 different components. We have our prompt template that will feed into the chat model, which will feed into the output parser. And then we have Dash. In this case that I'm going to show you, Dash is going to be used to grab the user input, to invoke the chain, which will produce an answer. And then Dash will display the result or the answer onto the page, right? So let me show you a brief example with an app that I created, which is a joke generating app. Now, this is a simple app just for the demo tutorial purposes, right? We're going to see apps from like industry level, professional looking apps, but just for tutorial purposes, I simplify this. All right, so go to my PyCharm. I'm actually going to run the app like that. And then you see that it's right here. It's a joke generating app. We have the title and we put the topic of the joke, and then it will produce a joke, right? So obviously here we are importing the libraries, and then we are building the chain. Remember in the slide, we said that we combined together, we tied together different LangChain components to build a chain. These are the components. We have the prompt template. And in this prompt, we are prompting the model to tell us a joke about a certain topic. Now, this topic is going to be grabbed by Dash from the user later below. And then the prompt is going to feed into the model, which in this case is our Chat GPT 3.5 Turbo model. And this is my OpenAI API key just for demo purposes. And then we have our string output parser. And what this does, this component, it stringifies the result. So it's a lot easier to display on the page. And everything here together, we put everything into one single chain. And now this is where Dash comes into play. In the app.layout, this is where we actually put onto the page what we want the user to see. We build our app, right? So we have, let's see an example in our app. We have our title, we have our small like instruction to the user to make a joke about something. And then the user will have the input field here to input the topic of the joke, right? So if we go back to the code, you see we'll have our title, joke generating app, the instructions or the label, and then an empty input field with an empty value, starts with none. But whenever the user puts like cats or dogs or bears, this will be a different value, right? That will be the value. And then here's where we're going to show our joke, right? So now is where the callback comes into play. The callback is what like ties everything, ties all the components together inside the layout. So in this case, we are actually taking the value of this input field, right? You see here the subject is a dash input component. We're taking the value, which at the beginning is none, but once the user puts a different word in here, let's say cats, it's taking that value and we're going to include it inside the callback function argument and grab it to actually replace this dictionary key, which started with foo. Remember, we said, tell me a joke about something, about foo. Now this is going to be cats, right? Because we input cats in here. So this will be replaced with cats. So the whole prompt is going to be, tell me a joke about cats or tell me a joke about dogs, whatever we want, right? It's going to input that. Is going to the prompt is going to generate a prompt value that's going to feed into the model, and the model is going to generate a joke, right? Or predict the most laughable, funniest joke possible, and then we're going to return this joke to the children property of the div. So right here, right? And that is how we see that we end up with a joke right under the horizontal line, right here on the page in the layout section. All right, so if I can go back to the slides with this brief overview. Let me share my script again. There we go. Now that you have a better understanding of how Dash and LangChain interact with each other, I'd like to invite our first community member to show us their app. The app that you're going to see today was built by Troy, and it combines Plotly Dash with LangChain and ChatGPT. The app answers questions about current stock market news for companies in the S&P 500. Hi, Troy. How you doing?
Doing very well. Thank you.
Troy, can you share with us how you got to know Dash and what made you want to learn Dash?
Sure. So I work in investment management, both as a manager of a quantitative fund and as someone who develops financial applications for banks and funds and other people who work in finance. I do a lot of data science using Python, and I've always been a big fan of the way that Plotly graphs allow you to be really interactive with your data. I started using Dash a few years ago, and it helped me a lot with data visualization and data analysis. I've spoken with many of my friends who work in finance, and I found that many financial companies have a need for sophisticated data analysis, but they're still tied to using Microsoft Excel and products that are just like much less capable of doing what it is that they need them to do. So I started working with some of these companies to help develop more sophisticated tools for their data analysis, visualization, tools, and tracking.
And what were the business needs that these apps address? Did you see any significant impact from the app that you created?
Yeah, I did. So there are many financial products that have complex investment terms where there's not going to be a simple Yahoo Finance page that's going to tell you everything that you need to know. You need a way of keeping track of these products as the markets move, as the valuations change. You're going to want to be able to have something that updates this type of information automatically. A lot of people I know, they're still using Microsoft Excel, and it's very time consuming and very error prone. And you can take a lot of these processes, automate them, and add a lot of just visualization, data visualization tools, tracking tools. And I find that Dash is a really useful and easy way to really save a lot of time, increase your accuracy, and provide these very useful tools for, especially in finance.
Great, Troy. Well, thank you for the introduction. I'm excited to see your app, and I'm sure our audience is as well. So feel free, the floor is yours. Take it away.
Sure. So the app that I'm going to be sharing with you guys is something that I designed to help investors use the power of large language models to summarize and synthesize stock market news and answer questions about what is happening in the news with regard to the S&P 500. So the different components of this application are, you've got Dash, which provides you with your user interactive front end. Then there's the news information that we're going to be using as the context to answer that question. That comes from AlphaVantage, which is a provider of financial information. You can sign up for AlphaVantage on their website. You can get a free API key that provides you with limited information, a certain set of queries, amount of queries you can run every day. And this is where we're going to get our context. This is where we get the news that we're going to be answering questions from. Then there's the LangChain agent, which is the part that organizes this information. It takes the context and the memory of the conversation that you've been having with your model and organizes it so that it can send it to ChatGPT. And the model, the large language model that we're going to be using as the core, is ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo. So LangChain takes the user inputs and the context, organizes it, sends it to ChatGPT, which provides us with the answer. And I will share my screen now so we can take a look at the application. Just let me know when you're ready.
Yep, ready.
Okay, so the way this works is first you need to have an API key from OpenAI, which in order to have access to the ChatGPT 3.5 turbo model. And you also need an AlphaVantage key in order to get the news stories to populate the information in this app. If you don't have an API key for AlphaVantage, you can actually just use demo, all lowercase, but then it will only provide answers specifically for Apple. So the first step in this application is we're going to select a stock. This is populated with the stocks in the S&P 500 that we can choose from. Once we call a stock, it triggers the dash callback, which does two things. First, it's going to provide us with a little bit of information in this Plotly polar graph. What this does is it takes all of the stocks in the S&P 500 and it provides you the relative performance, the relative metrics compared to the S&P 500. So we've just selected Apple, and we can see from our chart that Apple is in the 90th percentile when it comes to one-year returns. It's got a very high return on equity, a very high return on assets, but it has a very low dividend yield. So if you were interested in companies that are paying a dividend, not so much, you're interested in growth companies, then this is a good company for you. To give you another example, we can do ExxonMobil, which is not very good growth, but it has a high dividend yield. So this is just a tool that allows you to see at a glance some of the features that you might be interested in if you're an investor. Below that, we have a -AG grid table. And what this is doing is it's after we select the stock, it sends a query to the AlphaVantage API. AlphaVantage provides us with 50 news articles about the stock Apple. And these are displayed here in this table below. It provides us with summaries of the stock market stories. It provides us with links that we can click on to go to. It also provides us with a relevance score, which says how much is this news article relevant to Apple, and also a sentiment score so that you know, like, is this news article positive or negative news for the stock Apple? Once we have this information, this is the information that gets fed into LangChain as the context for the model. Now, I've already run this, so we didn't have to spend time actually sending the information to the ChatGPT 3 and waiting for the query to respond. But on the left-hand side, we have our user prompt. So the user would ask a question such as, what is the market sentiment around Apple recently? And then the next thing that pops up is the response. So it tells us the market sentiment around Apple seems to be positive. Then there are several articles discussing company earnings, et cetera, et cetera. And then because this, the agent that we're using, the LangChain agent, is a conversational agent, it has the memory to remember the prior conversation. So you can say, can you provide sources for this? It remembers the conversation you just had, and then it provides the sources. And what's really neat about this is normally with ChatGPT, it doesn't have knowledge about what has happened in the past 2 years or whatever it is that they stopped training this model. So by giving it the context of these news stories, it is able to provide you timely, relevant answers to these questions that we have to ask for it.
Thanks, Troy. Appreciate the overview. What would you say is, actually, could you tell us a little bit more about the LangChain chatbot technical implementation? If someone wanted to build a similar app to yours, what do they need to know or focus on?
Sure. So I had not used LangChain before doing this application challenge. So just by reading through the documentation provided and working through some of these examples, I was able to implement this in only a few days. So it is not that challenging to pick up. If you're familiar with Python, familiar with Dash, you should be able to implement something like this without too much trouble. The core of the program is a conversational retrieval agent. This performs a few different tasks. It's the thing that interacts with the ChatGPT model, does the heavy lifting. You provide it with a memory, so it will have memory of the conversation that you've already, the prior steps of the conversation that you've had. And then the other thing that you give it is you give it a set of tools. And these tools could include, you could give it a calculator if you want the application to be able to answer specific questions about particular types of math problems. You could give it a SQL database to say, like, have everyone's phone number in your organization. So you could say, like, if you, ChatGPT, if you are asked a question about, like, what is so-and-so's phone number in our organization, it knows, because you gave it this tool, look up the application, use this tool to answer questions about phone numbers. If you have a question about the stock market, use this application tool that has all of these stock market articles in it. And so in doing that, you really, you can take your GPT-3, your large language model, and give it much more ability to answer questions without hallucinations, and to be, very specific and updated in the information it's using to answer your questions.
Very nice. I know that hallucinations has always been a big problem for ChatGPT and similar models. So it's great to hear that you've taken steps to reduce that possibility. Troy, this is one Dash app, but I understand that you've built other apps as well. Can you tell us more about those, please?
Yes, of course. So one of the apps that I've been working on with some of the financial companies that I've been dealing with is to help them monitor and manage their structured products. Structured products are a type of investment where the performance of the investment that you are taking part in depends on the performance of other products. So for example, what I have right here is a dashboard that I've built to help one of the banks that I work with to manage their structured product. And in order to monitor these products, they need to know how are the underlying products doing, the underlying investment securities doing relative to the thresholds that are established. So in the one that we're looking at here, you can see that this product is a derivative of the performance of Apple, Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. And so with just a glance, you can see that all of these instruments are above their strike price, they're above the knock-in barrier, so they are above the performance thresholds. And this is the type of information that the banker and the customer is going to need to know. But if you had to do this manually, you'd either have to build an Excel spreadsheet, or you'd have to keep track of it every day. So it's just really complicated, time-consuming work to monitor this. But I've been able to do all of this in this application that you can see right here. There's a dash grid table at the bottom that provides a listing of all the products that they're interested in, that they have for their customers. The performance is monitored automatically. So if there's a green check mark, that means that the product is within its thresholds. If there's a red X, that means that it's fallen below its threshold. And this allows them to track this really easily. When you click on one of the rows in the table, it will automatically select the product that you're interested in. It will update the charts for you automatically. It provides you with this overview on the left-hand side that gives you the information that you might be interested in, like what is the coupon. It just things that would make it really easy for you to answer these questions that your customers may have. If you click a button, it pulls up the term sheet, so you can see the original terms that this product is based on. And there's also an analytics tab. So if you want to see the overview of how all of your exposure is going to change over time, you want to see the concentration of all of your different products, there's a Plotly tree graph that makes it really easy to see by instrument and by issuer how many products there are and what your exposure is. So I've found this to be incredibly useful. I think that the people who use it find it really useful. It helps solve this need that they otherwise would have had to do in Microsoft Excel and just spend a whole lot of time wasting.
Awesome usage of the tree graph, by the way, Troy. And thank you. This is such a nice surprise. I was expecting to and hoping to show our community your main stock savvy app, and we got another bonus app and highly professional one to see here today. So thank you so much for creating these apps and for sharing them with us. Our second app was built by Manuel, and it serves as a comprehensive knowledge base for gene and protein data. Hi, Manuel. How are you?
I am well. Thanks for asking.
Manuel, we've spoken a few times, and I know that you have a DevOps background. Can you please share with us why you chose to learn Dash?
Well, I started using Plotly visualizations in Jupyter Notebooks, and I really like the interactivity in the charts. I don't remember how I first became aware of Dash, but when I first saw it, I knew I had to learn it. Given that Dash allows you to deploy web applications, it's a very convenient way to share your visualizations with teammates or deploy an application on the open internet using a web server.
And what about LangChain? How did you discover LangChain?
I heard things about LangChain on YouTube and LinkedIn and so on and so forth, other forums on the internet. But I didn't have an excuse to learn it until I saw this building challenge that was posted on the Plotly community forum. The community post gave me the foundations of how to use LangChain within a Dash application. So I could use my existing knowledge in Dash and combine it with LangChain in order to build an application.
Cool. And just for our audience members, what Manuel just mentioned is the app building challenge. We host that on the Plotly forum once every 2 months or so. And we'll talk more about that at the very end through our community and newsletter. All right. Specifically, Manuel, about this app, what motivated you to build the app that you're going to present, and why is it unique?
So I wanted to build an application that focused in the field of bioinformatics. I think the field of bioinformatics and cheminformatics is very exciting. There's a lot of potential in creating advances in these scientific fields, given the implications in creating pharmaceuticals and also detecting diseases. And ChatGPT has an extensive knowledge in these fields, so it would really be beneficial to researchers and enthusiasts to use it in their investigations.
Cool. Well, I'd love to see the app, and I'm sure audience members too. So let me give you some screen share, and feel free to take it away.
Okay, so this is a conversational portal using LangChain and ChatGPT, and this is built on data that is retrieved from UniProt. UniProt is a knowledge base for gene and protein data. So a person here would search whatever they're looking for, and they would be given this table. As you can see, we have these gene names in this column, and a person would copy these genes for whatever they're investigating, and they would use it in the conversational app. So here, I'm going to give it a list of gene IDs that are retrieved from aspirin and ibuprofen, and I'm going to submit. What's happening here for each gene ID that I have provided, it's doing a HTTP request to UniProt's REST API and retrieving gene and protein data if there is a match. And as you can see by the second column, we have gene and protein data for these IDs that we have asked. And we have data regarding also descriptive values for the gene sequence, given the length and the molecular weight for these genes and protein sequences. I also wanted to include the ability for the researcher or the user to download these data sets in order if they wanted to perform any further analysis. They're able to download this data set that includes the gene sequence, and there's also comments from the submitters for these genes and proteins, and also cross-references for these genes and proteins that can be found in external databases. So here I'm going to ask ChatGPT if it can give me how are these genes used in the development of pharmaceuticals. So what's happening here is that from all the data that we retrieve from UniProt, it's transforming it into text embeddings. And this gives ChatGPT a contextual text foundation to enhance responses. This is known as a retrieval-augmented generation chain, and it gives you a response back given from the context provided. And it also gives you the ability to download the context that was given to ChatGPT in order for the researcher, if they want to enhance if they wanted to create their own application using the context provided. And just to show you how the context looks, this is an example. It's an array of strings, and what you see here is the text embeddings. And text embeddings are sentences in the form of statement, and they're constructed from the data that we retrieve from UniProt. As you can see here, we have this gene, and then the species where it belongs to, and also comments from the researchers who submitted this data. There's also information on the gene sequence, as well as information on its molecular weight and the length of amino acids in the gene sequence. There's also going to be information on identifiers in external databases, which would be these strings. I know this looks very complicated for us humans, but impressively enough, ChatGPT is able to parse these blobs of text. So here I'm going to ask it if it can summarize all the comments from the genes that we just searched. And just to give a more in-depth explanation of what's going on here, we're using a combination of the GPT 3.5 turbo model with the embedding model known as a text embedding ADA model. And as you can see, it can summarize the comments for the genes that we searched. And also, since I mentioned that there is also references to these genes and proteins in external databases, we can also ask it to give me the identifiers that are used. And I seem to have exceeded the limit of computing.
Now, Manuel, when you exceed the limit, because this often will happen to people that are using different models or OpenAI keys, what does that mean? When you exceed the limit, that means that too many tokens are used because there's too much data?
No, what's happening here is I did too many consecutive requests to the OpenAI model, and it just rate limit me.
Okay.
And you can overcome this by, of course, signing up to increase your rate limit. But in this case, I can just wait for 9 seconds, and then it will allow me to do the query. So if I try it once again.
Well, don't worry about it. I remember seeing something like that with my OpenAI key, and it said 7 point something seconds. I actually counted 8 seconds, and I tried and it didn't work because I was using like the first version of the OpenAI key. Well, let's see if it works. And if not, I do have a question for you. Let's give it a second.
Sure.
There we go.
Okay, so it did go through. And as you can see, it can also give us external references for these genes and proteins. And this is a gene ontology identifier that you're just one Google search away, where you can just put these keys in Google, and you'll be redirected to the external database, and you will get more data on these genes and proteins specifically. So I think it's a very powerful tool.
Nice. Sweet. Thank you for showing this to us, Manuel, and the overview. I'm curious, how would this app, for example, be used in a business setting, let's say at a pharmaceutical company?
So if this, for a business use case for this application, I think it can speed up the development, or also clear up any misconceptions or whatever you're researching at the time. Because this it's very convenient to have this application, because you're given a subject matter expert directly in your browser. So instead, it would just help you with answering questions or whatever is it that you need.
Cool. And if someone wanted to build a similar app to this one that you built, how do you recommend that they get started?
So if a person were to build something similar like this, I would recommend the same development process that I did. And I would first to identify what data source you want to use and the data that you will use to feed into LangChain in order for you to have these conversations. So in this example, I used Uniprot, which you can get data through a REST API. And through here, I just identified what data I wanted to use when having a conversation with ChatGPT. And once you identify the information that you have, you would, of course, create a Python module that does this individually, and you can get all the data that you need. And once you have that done, then you're able to create these text embeddings from the data that you parsed from the REST API. And having these things individually will make it much easier for you when you have to create your Dash application and using callbacks to auto-wire this functionality.
Cool. Manuel, thank you so much for building and showing and going over this app with us here today.
Yeah.
Oh, I keep on cutting you off before then. I'm sorry about that.
No, just saying thanks for having me.
Cool. All right. So moving on to our final app. Community member Vic built an app for summarizing, extracting, and plotting macroeconomic forecasts. Hey, Vic, how are you?
Hi, Adam. Not bad myself. And, well, thanks, Manuel, for his app. Bioinformatics AI seems to be an exciting field.
It is indeed. Vic, can you tell us a little bit about how you got started with LangChain?
Of course. I think around last year, I started exploring techniques to do semantic search across huge volumes of texts produced by, various macroeconomic institutions. And as any researcher knows, finding citations across hundreds of PDFs is a big pain. So LangChain Wrapper was a very elegant solution to combine off-the-shelf LLM technology with textual macroeconomic data, especially since all the data we're using is open source. Ultimately, such semantic search saves time for finding citations or tracking latest forecast or market guidance, while user prompting makes those texts more accessible to general public who are not well versed in economics jargon.
Right. What about Dash? How did you use Dash when you were working at the Central Bank of England?
I think anyone who works across a data pipe knows that often the ways to ingest, update, or present your data might be limited by the tech stack or the database of your organization. So often you end up with custom data extraction queries from your users that take a lot of time for data professionals to service. And the idea of using Dash is to create custom statistics or custom visualizations so your key stakeholders can, in a sense, self-service their data needs or combine data that can be too challenging for your data pipe to ingest naturally. In that sense, Dash is a great clutch solution for small tactical projects. And for instance, during my time at the bank, I built and shared a Dash app for other researchers to use internally. And the app tracks credit card debt across both UK and US and combines under the hood both Federal Reserve data and our internal Bank of England data.
Nice. Excited to hear that your bank was used within this. Your app was used between the Central Bank of England. Regarding the app that you're going to show us today, can you give us more context and about the app and the economics topic that you plan to talk about?
Of course. My app is called Central Bank Speak, and it focuses on extracting and summarizing macroeconomic forecasts from textual data across a range of sources to make it easier to search and understand economic data. And first, I would like to quickly explain what are central banks and what is the problem with the ways they communicate to the public and why we need an AI app for it. So central banks, if we can go one slide back, are in a sense money printing institutions, i.e. banks of banks. They're owned by national governments and can influence macroeconomic activity in your country through mortgages, saving deposits, business loans, and credit cards and other means. Yet they tend to be very ambiguous and vague in the ways they communicate, and this is called central bank speak. If we go next, here are just like a couple examples of central bank speak. Here is an old quote from Ben Bernanke that led to a meltdown in the bond market in 2013. And here are a couple more recent examples, like a famous quote by Jerome Powell about transitory inflation, or Janet Yellen saying that there is no mechanical interpretation of considerable time, which is, quite cryptic indeed. If we could go next. So what we're trying to achieve with the app, the main aim is really to ingest all of the PDFs and documents that various central banks publish, so we can summarize and find relevant information from the most recent announcements, instead of trying to decipher this central bank speak and track every publication manually. Now, if we go to the next slide, we will just briefly talk about the AI side of the app. The LLM framework that the app uses is called retrieval-augmented generation, or RAG for short. And the problem is that the stock ChatGPT or Llama can answer general trivia questions. However, because of knowledge cutoff and generalized nature of learning material, the quality of responses is varying. So what we want to do here is to create a special knowledge LLM and prevent it from hallucinating. The typical way is to retrain LLM from scratch, which is resource-intensive process. Instead, we can supply LLM with most relevant text from our knowledge store, let's say, and constrict LLM to answer user prompts only from such context. This is a much more straightforward solution. And here below is a diagram. We can see how LangChain horizontally interacts with Plotly vertically. And first step in the process is we web scrape our PDFs from the internet, and this is done in base Python. Then we use LangChain to extract text from PDFs, tokenize it, and cut the text into smaller text chunks. Then we do embedding, which is a process of taking chunks of text and converting them into numeric vectors. And then we are able to rank those texts based on relevancy to the topic of interest. Finally, we pass the most relevant chunks into our LLM and constrict it to answer questions exclusively based on the context provided. And we use Plotly to handle the user input side of our LLM, like text fields and buttons, and to visualize the output of our LLM, either in the form of a graph or a text card.
Thanks, Vic. This really helped me understand the process. I appreciate it. All right, well, let's go. I'd love to see your app. Let me give you some share screen capabilities.
Of course.
Okay, there you go.
So thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right. So once we launch the app, the first thing we do is we supply the app with a ChatGPT API key, and the app then checks that the key looks valid. Then we can select the tab with the currency of interest, and this will switch us between different data sources. Then we're able to download our PDFs and embed them into a SQL database inside the app. However, I skipped this part just because it takes a bit of time. And now we're able to switch between different topics like inflation, interest rates, GDP growth, and consumer spending. And this re-ranks most relevant text. If we find that the most relevant text is not quite what we are looking for, we are able to submit our own query, and we can also visualize the most relevant information in the form of a chart. That will take us a second. And what is important is that it always returns us citations like author, date, the specific page, and the title of the document from which the citation or the text paragraph is taken. And here is an example of our visualized plot. As we can see here, it returns us an interactive Plotly graph purely from a textual data that we supplied to LLM and that was later converted into a JSON. So Adam, would you like to ask ChatGPT anything?
Yeah, let me give it a shot. But Vic, just before that, I just wanted to say I really like how you set it up so it returns like the author, the date, the page number, because that's often something that I want. Like if I'm using models and I'm as a user of an app and I want to understand, I get like a great answer, but I want to understand usually where it comes from. Like where can I look more into this topic and read more about it? So kudos for doing that.
Of course.
Let's ask what will the interest rate be in 2024 and 2025?
Of course. What interest rates will be in 2024 and 2025? Now, once we submit it, it goes directly through an OpenAI API to the ChatGPT Turbo. It takes a bit of time to process because it supplies it with all the relevant context. And now it returns us the information. Based on the information provided, the Bank of England's projection from the November 2023 monetary policy report indicates that the market implied path for bank rate is expected to remain at around 5.25% until 2024 Q3. Thereafter, it is projected to decline gradually to 4.25%.
Cool. Let's try another question. Let's try what are the drivers of inflation?
Of course. So for this, we will switch our topic. This will re-rank the text chunks that are supplied to the model. And now we can ask, what are the main drivers of inflation? Again, now we submit our query.
So it's important to, before actually submitting the query, to choose the accurate
the relevant topic.
Okay.
Appropriate topic, because this will re-rank inside our vector store what is actually the most relevant textual context to supply to the app.
Okay.
And then, as we can see here, here's a whole list of all main drivers like wholesale energy prices, core goods inflation, services, import prices, domestic wages, and external cost pressures. And here we again see all the quotes to all the pages and all the document titles and the name of reports from which this information was taken. So you always have a citation to cover your research.
Really cool. Vic, what kind of technical advice would you give to someone trying to make their very own LangChain app?
Of course. So my app is 100% local, or as local as it can be. However, if you're planning to create a production level app, I suggest moving web scraping, text chunking, and vector database embedding to the backend, maybe by using a Pinecone or Azure Python server that your front-end Dash app communicates with, and which will return you through a JSON most relevant text chunks based on the topic.
Okay. And what would you recommend to people watching us today or watching the video later who are just getting started with Dash? What do you recommend they do?
I think start small. Take a look at pre-existing public data sources. For instance, Pandas Data Reader it's a great package to get data frames directly without using JSON or requests. And I suggest also looking at FRED, which is a Federal Reserve economic database. And it's a great free resource for all sorts of time series data, and I can't really recommend it enough.
Vic, thank you so much for joining the app challenge, for building
My
the
pleasure.
app, and coming here today and sharing with us. I appreciate it. All right, so I'd like to thank our app users, everybody, app authors, for your presentation and for showing us everything that Dash is capable of with AI and LangChain. The Dash open source framework is definitely a powerful tool for creating data apps, but if you want to take your apps to the next level and use them in a business setting, we would suggest using Dash Enterprise. This is a flagship offering of Plotly, and it offers a variety of tools for developers and users, as well as DevOps and customer support. Additionally, we have an exciting new feature called Smart Insights, which offers AI-generated insight for anomaly detection, trend identification, correlation analysis, and more. We're at the forefront here at Plotly of innovation with AI, and we're excited to take you along on our journey. If you're interested in learning more about these Dash Enterprise features, just let us know by emailing us at info@plotly.com. Again, that's info@plotly.com. At this point, I'd like to invite all of our guests to join us on camera again as we share some community updates. In efforts to learn and grow together, we hold community meetups the last Thursday of every month to discuss ongoing projects and the latest Dash developments. If you'd like to join our monthly meetups, just email me at adam@plotly.com. Again, to join the monthly meetups, just email me using this email address, adam@plotly.com. Another way to stay up to date with the latest Plotly and Dash developments is to sign up to our free Dash Club newsletter. By signing up, you're going to learn about future app building challenges, future releases, and webinars. If you'd like to receive the newsletter, just click the link shared in the message section of this side panel. Last but not least, we are in the UK next month attending the CDAO UK event. So if you're in the area, make sure to register and come by to see us. All right, I'm looking at the time. We do have a few more minutes for questions, audience questions. So let me look here at my questions and see which one I would ask first. Okay, so this question is for you, Eric. Does LangChain allow the utilization of any LLM model?
Definitely. Yeah, we support more than 100 LLMs and chat models, ranging from some of the GPT models from OpenAI that you saw today to open source models like Mistral and Llama. So you can kind of experiment with all of them in the same interface, which is quite nice.
Cool. Thank you, Eric. The next one is for Troy. Troy, how do you keep track of the errors, meaning like hallucinations of the answers?
So when you're putting together your application, the agent that you're using, you're going to provide it with certain context. And so, for example, one of the examples they have in the LangChain documentation is they say, like, if you give your application a calculator, you should, as context, say, you're really bad at math unless you use this calculator. So for my application, I say, like, okay, you are a bot that answers questions about the stock market, but you are really bad unless you are answering specifically from this information that is provided for you. So reference this documentation, reference this tool to answer questions about the stock market. And then in addition, you can choose other agents that will provide you with, say, like, add the context. So when you're answering the question, also provide the source. That just obviously helps you to double check your work.
I see. Thank you, Troy. This next one is for Manuel. How do you handle the token limits in LLM models? Is there any way to make memory infinite so that the model remembers all the historical conversation and reply? Let's start. There's two separate questions. So let's start with the first one. How do you handle the token limits in LLM models?
Well, OpenAI gives you a monthly stipend of $5 for each account that is existing in OpenAI, and you're able to use that OpenAI key in your applications. If you need to increase the limit, of course, you would just sign up with your credit card, and you would increase the token limit that you're allowed to do your queries on. But I think the question might be referring to the error that happened during the presentation. That was I exceeded the rate limit, and that happens when you do too many consecutive calls to the OpenAI API, and that can be also overcome by signing up a credit card and increasing your rate limit if your application needs to do multiple consecutive calls to OpenAI.
Oh, so there's two. If I understand correctly, there's two different limitations. One is how many tokens you use, and the second is how frequently you access it.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So the other question here was, is there any way to make a memory infinite so that the model remembers all the historical conversation and replies accordingly?
Yes, there is a way to do that. I wasn't able to implement it, but I would encourage you to go to the LangChain documentation, as it is very well explained on how to create your retrieval-augmented generation chain and how to implement a library that is called conversation buffer memory that allows you to store all the responses and questions that you have done and use that as a foundation for your next questions.
Cool. Thank you for that. That was a great response. Something new that I learned as well. This question is for Vic. Vic, does the web scraping module use an agent to scrape relevant PDFs or web documents online? If yes, then how do you ensure that all documents scraped are relevant?
Not quite. It uses the requests module, which is standard for Python, and because all the central banks tend to publish documents in more or less like systematic fashion, so you can guess the PDF name and the general direction where on the central bank's website the PDF lies. You can just for loop through it through requests, and then just download every single PDF that actually exists on their website. However, you need to be conscious that you can hit 400 bad requests. So the server from which you're actually web scraping will think that it's getting DDoSed just because of continuous iterative requests sent. So just be mindful of limits of web scraping, but it's just off your shelf normal for looping through requests.
Cool. Thank you, Vic. This question was, I think might have been for me by the audience members, but Eric, I'm gonna ask your help on this one. So this community member was saying that they're familiar with Dash, but they're new to LangChain. Is the purpose of LangChain simply to integrate LLMs into like a front-end interface, or is there more to it?
Yeah, there's a lot to it, and I would highly recommend going through some of our docs at python.langchain.com or js.langchain.com, depending which language you want to start from. Probably most people here are starting from Python. And you can build anything from some of the retrieval-augmented generation applications that you saw today, all the way through kind of like self-running, long-running agents. We recently released some features around that, around LangGraph and OpenGPTs. So yeah, lots to explore. It's a fun time to be alive.
It is, definitely. Thank you so much, Eric. All right, we are going to wrap up the webinar for today. We do have a few more questions, but we want to make sure that we put more thought in answering them and give you the best response possible. So we're sorry if we didn't get to all of the questions with 2 more minutes that we have left, but feel free to reach out to us at info@plotly.com. Again, it's info@plotly.com, and we will reply to you as soon as possible. Thank you again to our speakers and to all of our attendees for joining us. Make sure to look out for the recording after the webinar along with some resources. Thank you, everyone.